Hello and welcome again. This is Dave from the Four Geeks and Microphone podcast, joined by Andy, and we're going to be talking about X-Men: Days of Future Past this time. How's it going, Andy?
It is going very well. Very excited to talk about this movie because this was
Excellent.
the one movie this summer that I thought was going to be total horse crap.
And it turned out it was not. It was one of the best movies so far this year, I think.
Yeah, surprised the bugger out of me on that.
All right, so did you have any previous knowledge of this story going into it? Like, did you read any of the comics beforehand or anything like that?
My knowledge was insofar as knowing that it existed
Okay.
and
So,
that Kitty Pryde went to the past.
and you've seen the other X-Men movies, obviously, then.
I've seen the good and the bad, all, what, seven of them?
This is the seventh of them, I think, yes.
Okay. And just for the record, and this probably will only come up later, but my favorite of all X-Men related titles is last year's The Wolverine. That's
Mm,
only going to be relevant about something I'm going to bitch about later.
okay,
If Dave understands already.
yeah. So, um, with this movie, we have a merging of the casts of the X-Men. Because you have the X-Men cast from the X-Men First Class movie, and you have the X-Men cast from the original X-Men movies.
Yep.
All merged together into one movie. Plus, you have new characters introduced, like Blink and Bishop, that had not been in any previous movie, at least not in any significant role. Um,
I thought they were going to be so superfluous. Like, seriously, you already have a cast of like 13 people, and now you're going to add a bunch of other people who like don't matter. And then, the opening scene, you're suddenly like, oh my god, these guys are cool.
well, and you actually care about the characters with the little bit that you see them, I think.
I know that's
Even
impressive.
Warpath and Colossus, who don't have significant parts in the opening sequence, they're there and you care about them. And of course, Iceman, played by Shawn Ashmore, not to be confused with his twin brother Aaron.
Yeah, Dave.
I'm sorry, I didn't even realize they were twins. I knew that they were brothers and they were two separate people. Did not know they were twins until like a week ago. So, but yeah, I mean, even those characters, you actually care about them. So, when bad stuff happens to them, it means something. You feel something for the characters.
Who
I
was
mean,
the who was the dude who with dreadlocks and had other people like blast their power at him, so he had that power or something?
that was Bishop. And what he would do is he would take energy from other people and convert it into a different energy that he could then shoot through his gun.
Oh, that's
Uh,
pretty cool.
Yep, Blink was the teleporter. She could open up the portals between spaces, kind of like the video game Portal.
That was spectacular.
Amazingly done. And then you had, of course, Storm was in the beginning of the movie. Professor X and Magneto were in the beginning of the movie. Wolverine was in the beginning of the movie. Iceman and Kitty Pryde or Shadowcat were in the beginning of the movie. So, and that all leads up to the fact that there's a bleak, bleak future ahead of everybody because these Sentinels that have been created are taking out both humans and mutants. And for the love of God, we finally have an X-Men movie that has Sentinels in it.
Yeah, well, whatever.
Oh, come on. They were such a big part of the comics, the early cartoons. They were like the ultimate villain.
Yeah, I
And
remember the Sentinels very fondly from the 1990s animated cartoon series.
yeah,
But the trailers again, just leading up to the movie, the trailers did nothing to make me interested in the Sentinels. I mean, the generic looking, the futuristic Sentinels, they were just like, wow, there's like no creativity to this whatsoever. It looks exactly like the Destroyer from Thor.
yeah, that part did bother me a little bit.
But lo and behold, Dave, and the opening scene, the Sentinels be, become freaking frightening. They have learned to adapt to mutant powers put onto them, and they seem like this indestructible force that just will not stop, like a freaking Terminator. So,
Yep.
again, another one of those situations where I'm like, bad mouthing what the Sentinels look like, and what these things are hideous, and there's no originality in this movie whatsoever. And then, like within 6 minutes of watching Days of Future Past, I'm like, oh my god, this is so cool. Like the Winter Soldier for the Captain America movie this year. Like
Yep.
he felt like the most intimidating villain I've come across in a Marvel film because he was just relentless. He will not stop, and I actually felt jeopardy for the characters. And like I normally don't feel that way for Marvel movies because you're like. People are going to be okay, and if they die, they'll come resurrected in the next movie. But there was genuine threat, Dave.
Yeah, there was, and that was the great thing about the story, even back in, back in the '80s when the story originally was written, is that you felt that there was a genuine threat to these characters. So being able to translate that into this film, I thought was amazing. And then I kind of like what they're doing with this movie, whereas X-Men First Class took place in the '60s, Days of Future Past took place in the '70s. Does that mean that the next movie will have a tie to the '80s?
I don't think so. Based off comments made by screenwriter Simon Kinberg, if I got the name right, it seems to suggest X-Men Apocalypse is going to take more with the original trilogy cast more so than the First Class
Okay.
cast.
Well, that's a little unfortunate because
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that it's arguable, but I think that the cast of First Class is actually a better cast than the original run in some aspects.
Okay, this is my own personal opinion, but I am so deeply in love with Michael Fassbender that I could forgo every other X-Men cast member and just watch Eric do his thing. Like, just give me an Eric movie. I don't care what he does. I don't care if it's just him walking around New York City, like Peter Parker in Spider-Man 3, giving people the gun signals. Just I want Michael Fassbender to star in his own movie as Magneto. Just give me that.
So what you're saying is you want an X-Men Origins Magneto starring Michael Fassbender.
Well, no, because we already got that in First Class. I just want a long, extended Fassbender love letter, please.
Michael Fassbender, he has great chemistry on screen with the other characters that he's on screen with, whether it's Professor X or Wolverine or Mystique. I mean, he raises the bar, and everybody else kind of rises up to join him at that level.
Oh my God, yes. I mean, I enjoy everything other. I enjoy the whole bloody movie, but the sequences, like on the airplane with Eric and Xavier just talking about the losses they both have experienced, and then the sequence where Eric takes Mystique / my future wife Jennifer Lawrence into like a phone booth, and they just talk about their own pasts. Those were two just electrifying sequences that had really nothing to do with special effects or anything, but like the special effect is the chemistry and just how fantastic these people are.
Well, that's one thing I noticed about this movie is that this movie was a much more of a character-driven story than an action or a special effects-driven story, which I loved. There were action sequences and there were special effects sequences, but by far the main draw to this movie is the development of the three main characters for this movie, which would be Professor X, Mystique, and Magneto.
Yeah, it's a very good development that's happened in the last three movies, First Class, The Wolverine, and this, that they've concentrated so much on character development. And as you said in the Godzilla podcast, me trying to going to school as a screenwriter, like I'm just totally in love with these films because there's so much emphasis on character instead of just like, oh, we need a 10-minute break before the next action sequence. Quick, just do a funny dance.
Well, this is one of those examples, too, of what I like about certain action movies, where it's the story that drives the action and the characters that drive the action. It's not
Yes.
the action that drives the story.
They aren't reactionary characters. They are ones that hear about something and are like, I'm going to make a move, and that move causes a ripple effect with the rest of the story and how everybody else reacts and then makes their moves. That's what I find so enjoyable.
Well, and this movie has a perfect example of that in Magneto. Magneto hears about this horrible, horrible future that is caused by Mystique. So you think at first that he's going to do option A, and he's going to go along with the plan to save Mystique and get her out of danger and to convince her that her way is wrong. But then he does this classic Magneto twist on it, and he takes it to the next level of, well, I need to protect the mutants from, everything, including other mutants. So we're just going to kill Mystique because she's a threat. And there's a great it's a great turn in the character of, he will do what needs to be done, and his sense of morality has been so colored by what happened to him in the past with the Nazis that, what his idea is almost a polar opposite, the exact opposite almost of Xavier's. I mean, that type of storytelling and that type of writing of these characters, that's just amazing to see, and amazing to see develop on screen.
Yeah, man. When that reversal happened, and he, makes that gun come to his hand, and he's just ready to offer, that was like, oh shit. Like, I don't get surprised too often by movies because I try to think, 5 steps ahead. But that was one of those moments like that is like perfect sense within this character.
And it totally surprised you too. It was not something that you would necessarily see coming until it happened, because it was just that turn, that switch.
All right. Well, I don't want to make this into just a me Fassbender love fest. But so, what did you think about the prominent role that Mystique played in the narrative?
I loved it. It's in the original movies, Mystique, played by Rebecca Romijn, she didn't really come across as that much of a essential character. It was nice to see her there, but I had issues with the fact that, she's basically running around naked, and I still had issues with that fact in X-Men First Class, and even this one a little bit, that she's basically running around naked.
Yes, I have so much issue with that.
I don't know. People claim that it's the sign of a strong female character, but I'm like, no, it's the epitome of every male geek out there that they want to see these characters run around naked, and you do, but you don't. So I have some issues with that. That being said, I thought that her character and the role she played in the story was extremely well done. I love the fact that they gave her such an important role, and that they developed that character as much as they have over the past couple of movies between First Class and Days of Future Past. I was really happy that that character has started to grow and develop and become a very important character to these movies.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I love how pretty much the entire plot hinged on Mystique. Her mutant DNA was basically what jump-started the whole Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Not to talk about the next movie, Apocalypse. And then her own personal story as a lost, wayward soul who feels like she's been manipulated by the 2 people in her life who loved her, and how she tries to come to terms with that. Just really well done and really really compelling.
Extremely compelling. I love the fact that it wasn't until the end where Charles finally gets it into his head that he's always been trying to control her. He's always been trying to tell her what to do. He even refers to her as being raised by him, even though they grew up together, which Magneto points out. I mean, it's character stuff like that that just really endears me to this movie. And even the secondary characters like Bolivar Trask, played by Peter Dinklage. I mean, while he doesn't have a huge arc, he's an important character to the story, and he does bring, a level of, I don't know, just a depth of character to the role, even though he doesn't have a huge arc in and of itself. I mean, it's fun to watch these characters interplay with each other, although he is probably, now that I think about it, he's probably the one character that had the most screen time with any other character that never really interacted with any other character.
Who, Trask?
Yeah.
I mean, my only complaint about Trask is that his final scene was not the courtroom sequence where he looked at everybody and said, "I should have let Stannis kill all of you." That would have made the movie.
They might have avoided that because he might have had a similar scene as that, and it's something else he's done recently. But
best of both worlds. Anyway.
But no, he really is like a legitimately awesome actor.
Yes.
And he definitely brings a level of professionalism to the roles he takes. And the roles he takes that I've seen him in, most notably both Game of Thrones and this movie, it's not like they're just copies of each other either. They're very different characters, and he manages to bring a different, a different aspect out for each character, I think.
Well, Trask is a very goal-oriented exterminator, and Tyrion is a sarcastic, drunk womanizer. So they are very different characters, Dave, yes. And I don't think you could get Tyrion's attitude into Trask unless they wanted to add another 20 minutes of film time.
You know what I'm saying? Because there are some actors that don't really play the character; they play themselves and just recite the lines.
Yeah, I know. I'm just taking you too literally for the sake of the joke.
No, that's fine. Joke all you want.
Okay.
So that leads us, that kind of leads us up to the end of the movie and the big actual action sequence of the movie, which still wasn't a huge action sequence. It was the Magneto's attack on the White House. I mean, it was definitely the culmination of everything that had come to that movie, but it still wasn't like this huge be-all, end-all, knockdown, drag-out brawl that some people would come to expect. It was a very character-driven and at times emotional fight between the three main characters, with supporting roles from Hank McCoy, the Beast, and Wolverine. And even Wolverine got kind of taken out of that fight relatively quickly.
Which was very lame. I mean, Wolverine had barely anything to do in this movie.
But I don't mind that, because the story really wasn't about Wolverine. Wolverine was kind of he was like the MacGuffin almost. He was the object that kind of propelled the story, and then the characters took that and ran with it.
I know, I totally agree with it, but at the same time, people are dishing out this money not so much for Eric and Xavier, but they want to see Hugh Jackman kicking some ass, and I just wish he had a little bit more to do, but I can still respect his shortened affection into the... Never mind, I'm rambling. Continue.
I was just going to say, the one character that actually did have a fairly important part that was really, really fun to see was Quicksilver. The fast guy.
I know Quicksilver.
I don't know if you know who Quicksilver is.
The true Quicksilver is only played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, Dave.
Yeah. Well, he's got a lot to live up to in that movie after seeing Quicksilver in Days of Future Past, because, let's be honest, that was probably one of the coolest characters in the movie, and the sequence in the kitchen as they're breaking out Magneto was probably one of the coolest scenes in the entire movie.
Directorially, yeah, I was very surprised by how well it was done.
Well, I mean, that's what that was. Is that was one of their really two big special effects sequences, maybe three big special effects sequences, because you have the fight, the future fight too. But that was really one of the big special effects sequences in the movie, and it was fun. It was fun both times I saw it. It was interesting. It kept my attention. I saw new things each time, and it was just extremely well done. And I really, really enjoyed that sequence. And again, it plays to the character, not necessarily just to the action.
Yeah, speaking about the character, I like how he just comes in and out. Like, the only reason he's doing what he's doing is because he likes the idea of breaking into the Pentagon. Otherwise, he could give less of a shit about it. So I thought that was very in tune with the character, and I liked it, but I really hated his costume. But otherwise, I liked it.
He didn't really have a costume. It was more like his Sunday clothes or something.
Okay, but that jacket he wore, ew, fashion faux pas. I don't, you know what I wear. It's not like I'm exactly like the Carrie Bradshaw of fashion, but I know enough to be like, that is hideous. Take that off. Wear something better.
He was dressed appropriately for the 70s, though.
That looked more like some sort of 1990 I like aliens come abduct me type of thing.
No, unfortunately, I'm pretty sure that was pretty authentic to the '70s.
Whatever, bro.
But, but yeah,
You
I
should
mean,
know you were only 80 years old at the time.
'82.
I'm sorry.
But so I mean but that brings us up to the end of the movie where they jump back to the future, and you have the big fight at the end, and everything looks bleak and hopeless, and you see that Magneto and Xavier have finally come to amends with each other. They finally have come to truly understand each other, and then the Sentinels come in and they kill everybody, and you're not sure what happens because they don't. At that point in the movie, you don't really know if what they did in the past succeeded or not. And then it, you get you get Wolverine, who kind of is the centerpiece. He's that little story element that drives the story forward as he wakes up and is like, "What's going on? Where am I?" And that's where you get the rest of the X-Men from the original movies. You have Anna Paquin show up again. You have Sean Ashmore show up again, or Ashmore show up again. You have scenes. You're back in the mansion, and he doesn't know what's going on. And then you see the thing that I didn't expect to see at all is you see Jean Grey.
Oh, I totally expected. Come on. It's been a year and a half in development, and every interview, Mr. Bryan Singer's talking about, yeah, we made some bad mistakes with X-Men 3 The Last Stand. Well, we're going to use this movie to remedy that. So you knew exactly what they were going to do.
I see, and I didn't see those interviews. I didn't listen to a lot of that or read a lot of that. So I was not expecting it. And immediately when I saw her, I went back to the Wolverine movie, and I'm like, is he hallucinating again? Is this just somebody that he's seen? Because of all the other stuff that's happened to him recently. Is he maybe actually dead, and this is like his version of heaven? What's going on here? And then to have him go up, approach her and try to touch her, and then have Scott show up too, I thought was
that was the perfect reintroduction of Scott. That was great. Hey buddy, get away from my girl.
Yeah, I thought that was perfect. And then having Xavier go, oh, we have a lot to talk about. That I thought that was just a really good end of the movie, although not the end I was expecting. The end I was expecting would have been more of a almost like a to be continued type of ending that would have led more into the Age of Apocalypse storyline.
I'm very happy that Days of Future Past, with the exception of the post credits, was a very self-contained story. So I'm happy they didn't make it like a to be continued, dun 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 dun, Back to the Future 2 type of thing.
I don't think they would have needed to do it as a to be continued type of like ending, but I would have liked to have seen the ending. Or let me take that back. I liked the ending the way that it ended because I thought that was the perfect ending to this movie. I was expecting, after seeing the first 10 minutes of the movie the first time through, that it would end in such a way as to have a much more open door to the next movie, which is the Age of Apocalypse. And I was fully expecting him to, like, when he got back to the future of his present, that it was, that it wasn't all happy, rainbows and sunshine. It was still a bleak future, but it was a bleak future because in this one, Apocalypse came to power instead of the Sentinels.
Nice.
So, because that's kind of how it happened in the comics, is somebody went back in time, changed something, and Apocalypse came to power because there was nobody to stop him. So the future was dark and bleak and not so good. Although mutants did rule everything, there was definite survival of the fittest hierarchy of the mutants.
Mr. Comic Book Nerd. Nice. I'm going to bring you into all my comic book related podcasts.
Yeah, I can talk some comic stuff. I've read more than a few comics in my day.
All right. Before we move on to the ending, I want to talk about the White House ending / future thing. I'm going to do a negative and a pro. One negative I don't like so much is the cliche of history changing at the exact moment it looks like everybody's about to get obliterated, annihilated by the Sentinels. Okay, that I understand as far as like a dramatic thing that works a lot and gets you invested, but I feel that's way too much of a trope that's been utilized 9 million times.
Let me stop you there real quick, because the reason for that though is, and they had set that up well at the beginning, that when that if he were to die, any changes he made would then be made permanent.
Yeah.
So, but I get what you're saying, that it's a bit of a trope.
And then this is kind of like a small pro, but I just really like how when Magneto goes to the stadium, starts pulling it out, I was just fully expecting a Captain America the Winter Soldier type thing where the last 20 minutes of the movie is just going to be this vast array of meaningless CG explosions and things running into each other, and just like you're not really, at least for me personally, I wasn't too invested in the last 20 minutes of Winter Soldier because it's just digital things running around. But instead, this grand thing is just like the home of this very more intimate moment that's happening between Eric, Xavier, and Mystique. So I just really like how they made it seem like, man, we're about to get into full Hollywood blockbuster mode, but instead it stood its ground and said, no, characters front and center. So I just wanted to give big kudos to the screenwriters and even Bryan Singer, who I really don't like, to just making a damn good ending.
Well, and that's the people behind the movie understanding the source material, because when it comes to the comics, and when it comes to X-Men versus the other Marvel heroes, the X-Men, at least from the days when I read them back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, they were really character-driven stories. You know, there was action and there was drama, you know, but ultimately it all came down to the characters, and you know, who was your favorite character, who was your favorite, you know, X-Men, who was your favorite villain that they fought, that type of thing. And the fact that these characters, you know, were so developed in the comics, and it's finally starting to translate onto screen, just means that they're really starting to understand what these stories are supposed to be about. They're not supposed to be about the big explosions, the big Hollywood ending. They're supposed to be about the subtlety of the characters and how they affect the world around them.
Yeah, overall I agree. I was just, when you were talking about it, part of my brain is just thinking you're giving Hollywood too much credit, because like, if it was just up to the big bosses who write the check, they will always go for the big sappy Hollywood ending with big explosions and shit. I think comics have less to do with the success of like the character-drivenness of movies. I don't want to sound like the guy who will always be like Dark Knight trilogy, but look, man, we owe the current crop of character-driven stories entirely to Begins and Dark Knight primarily, because before those movies, like even the Raimi trilogy of Spider-Man, those are special effects and villains first, characters second or third. And I know you'll probably argue with me, because that's what we do. But well, I think you have to give credit to the Nolan and Goyer, because those guys put character and story front and center, and people have forever changed. Audiences have changed because they suddenly realized that's what they want, and screenwriters have changed because they realized that the audience responded to that, and the studio just wants to make money, and because Dark Knight made $1 billion, Dark Knight Rises made $1 billion, so like, we need to do more of that. So don't give too much credit to the comics. Just give credit to, you know, the Dark Knight trilogy having freaking amazing success and people being like, we need to copy that, and that works. That formula works.
But again, that's the people behind it, the director, the writer, you know, the people who are responsible for the creating of the movie, who it's their understanding of the source material that allowed those stories to come to fruition to begin with. And because they were able to nail the source material on screen for at least Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, it really drove those movies, and it really resonated with people, because people went, wow, they were able to tell a good story, and it was a story that, you know, I really enjoyed, on top of the fact that it's Batman. You know?
Okay, I'll agree with that.
So again, I think it goes back to it's their understanding of the source material that these movies came about from that helped, push these movies to be as great as they were. And I think that shines 100% like through in X-Men Days of Future Past. They had a great understanding of the source material. They also understood that they were going to kind of merge their X-Men First Class storyline and Days of Future Past storyline with the original X-Men trilogy and the Wolverine and X-Men Origins Wolverine. And they were going to kind of take this kind of murky stew that they had started to create and bring it all back into focus with Days of Future Past, which I think they did a brilliant job of doing.
It's been 6 movies. If they didn't have a good handle on these characters by now, there is something very, very, very wrong.
But that does happen with movies, as you've seen with other series with that are less movies. It's easy to lose track of a character. And James Bond. James Bond is a perfect example.
James Bond gets reinvented like nearly every other 2 movies.
But it's an easy character to lose track of and focus on things like the gadgets or, the super spy equipment and things like that, and lose track of, what's important, which are the characters in the show, which is why, like the last Pierce Brosnan movie, which had the invisible car and other things and was very effects-driven, didn't do so hot, versus Casino Royale with Daniel Craig, which didn't really have a lot of special effects or gadgets, and is considered one of the best James Bond movies ever.
Okay, but see, the James Bond, for all of its longevity, is a perfect commentary. Like, it's a reflection. These movies, the Bond ones, are a reflection of what that current culture wanted. Like, they capitalized on whatever was popular at the time. And so I can't comment on, 1960s Bond to 1980s Bond, because I don't bloody know Bond in that time, but I know Pierce Brosnan to Skyfall Bond. And Pierce Brosnan started off with a bang, and they started off very much with gizmos and gadgets, and people responded to that. So it kind of became like a Schumacher thing, where so people responded to this extravagant stuff. Well, let's just over extravagant it.
How dare you bring up the name that shall not be named?
Well, look, when you're talking about the Brosnan era of Bond, you're also talking about like the Schumacher era of Batman. They go hand in hand nearly.
Oh, you're lucky you're not here with me. Otherwise, there would be some blows coming to fruition soon.
Well, this is just revenge for all the naysaying you do on the things that I enjoy.
Well, that's because the things you enjoy need naysaying. Schumacher. No. Nah, I've said his name. I made it real.
Anyway, back to this movie we were talking about.
X-Men: Days of Future Past. Good movie.
Okay, well, you know what? I just wanna do a bitch thing right now. And okay, so great. You reestablished the timelines where we now have Jean Grey back. We now have Scott Summers back, and Patrick Stewart is alive and well somehow. But you've essentially nullified two or three movies, and they aborted timeline. And you're not only are you saying that from a story and characters perspective, but you're also saying, as a studio, those last couple movies that we spent $500 million making, we didn't even really need to make them because they're just mistakes. But I am preferring to look at what Days of Future Past has done as akin to the Star Trek reboot. As in, the Prime timeline still exists, meaning the original trilogy happened, yep. And then the Wolverine still has purpose. Logan still had to go through all that journey of his own. And, in fact, that timeline is still going on, and Logan's doing whatever he needs to do. And then I'll just say that whatever happens from Days of Future Past onwards will happen in the secondary timeline, so they'll both exist parallel. That's how I'm going to cope with this. Otherwise, I'm going to be a very, very angry customer.
That's actually probably the best way to cope with it, because that's basically how Marvel has dealt with alternate timelines and changed histories and things like that. Is they haven't done it to the same extent that DC has, but they've done it very similar, where it is part of an alternate timeline now, and that's still going. But now we're on, this timeline, which we're gonna, which is our new Prime timeline, and we're gonna focus on that. So they've done similar things in the past, not to, not to the same extent that DC has, where they, every so many years they go through a Crisis on Infinite Earths type of scenario, and they go, okay, Batman from 1980 to 1990, he's getting old and outdated, so he no longer exists in this timeline. He's part of a different Earth, and now we're focused on the New 52 Batman or whatever.
Translation: damn it, Marvel is beating us again this quarter. What can we do to make sales? Oh, let's reboot everything.
There's a little bit of that in there, but when it comes to comics, I think Marvel and DC trade one-for-one punches very, very regularly, because while Marvel has some big properties in X-Men, Spider-Man, Avengers, etc., DC has some of the best and most iconic characters in Superman, Batman, Flash, Wonder Woman, etc., and the Justice League. So, I mean, they're pretty equal when it comes to the comic side of things. It's more along the lines of the movies, where Marvel definitely has the edge when it comes to movies, just because they came up with a plan. Their plan succeeded much more than anybody ever expected, and they've taken the ball and run with it. And now DC is trying to play catch up. So we'll see how it goes, though.
I'm sorry, Dave. I know we're talking about a Marvel movie, but since I have you here on the record, I want to ask you a question about a DC property.
Okay.
What do you think? And I'm not being subtle here. What do you think about that ridiculously stupid name of Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice?
Okay, the name itself, I'm surprisingly, even surprising to myself, I'm surprisingly okay with it. Is it the best name out there? No. I read somewhere somebody went, "Why didn't you just call it Dawn of Justice?" I would have been like, you know what? That's a great name for a movie. Shows that it's a prequel to the Justice League movie. That's fine. Or even just like you could even go on with like a Batman / Superman, World's Finest, or Batman versus Superman, or just left it as Batman versus Superman. You didn't need the Dawn of Justice ending to it, because I don't know. I think that muddies the waters a little bit.
The Dawn of Justice thing is the one that's irking me the most here.
Yeah, I mean they're trying to put too much into the title, and if I had to guess, I would guess that it would get changed probably one more time.
I'm okay with that.
But we'll see. So anyway, X-Men though. Back to X-Men finally. So you stayed for after the credits. You saw the thousands chanting for En Sabah Nur.
I had to go to comicbookmovie.com and read what that meant. Like, I know about the next movie,
Yep.
but I didn't understand what that meant. And I think I have a better grasp on it. I understand who that character is and his importance, but what's the deal with the pyramid thing?
So basically what it is En Sabah Nur is Apocalypse. He is one of the biggest, baddest villains in the Marvel Universe. And that shot that you see is, I would guess, 10,000 years ago. It's either him discovering the alien technology and then building the pyramids, or it's his own mutant power that's allowing him to build the pyramids, and then he will, at some point in the future, discover the alien technology that makes him truly, truly scary. But the coolest part about the sequence at the end is when you see him, you come up over the sand dune, and you see the guy standing there. You don't quite see what's going on until the camera gets close enough. You notice he is a blue-skinned figure, and then the camera pans.
He looks very pale.
He's actually supposed to be blue-skinned, but you see the camera pan, and you see the person that they seem to be worshiping. They're calling En Sabah Nur, which is Apocalypse, and you see his 4 horsemen off in the distance, and that's a classic thing. It's because it's the 4 horsemen of Apocalypse: death, famine, war, and plague, or death, famine, war, and plague, yeah. So, but that was supposed to be the yes. This is Apocalypse. We are doing an Age of Apocalypse storyline. Apocalypse will be playing a part in the next movie. So.
Oh my God! Okay, I'm looking at the image right now and there are the Four Horsemen. That's awesome.
Yep. So and that's one of the other things that, you know, because I'm such a comic book geek when it comes to X-Men and I'd read them for so many years, that I'd hoped that they would have introduced more of, you know, like introduced more of the characters who would later become the Four Horsemen of Apocalypse. Especially since Blink was in the beginning, because she was a character who wasn't even in existence until the Age of Apocalypse storyline happened, and then she was able to transfer out of that storyline, which was its own little timeline essentially, and she came into the normal Marvel universe. So she was a character that was only in existence in a sub-timeline and came into the full timeline at some point. So that's one of the reasons I was hoping that there would be more with Apocalypse at the end of the movie than just that little snippet that we saw at the end of the credits.
Nah, I'm very pleased that it was a tag instead of incorporated in the main plot. It's right where it should have been. Like in the Wolverine, where there was a mid-credit tag for Days of Future Past.
True. So, but I think we're done here. We've definitely talked about this movie and many others this time around. So
one more query.
Oh, you have more things. Okay.
Okay, so I just want your personal opinion on how Charles Xavier, Mr. I just got splintered into nothingness by Dark Phoenix, is still, like, I can buy that Eric regained his powers after the cure. Okay, I'll do that. But how did Mr. I get splintered into bloody things, and then I put my consciousness into another body, which doesn't look like me at all, and yet it's full-on paraplegic Charles Xavier in the future timeline? How is that possible?
Okay, so I'm going to get really comic book nerdy here.
All right.
The body that his mind inhabited was basically a blank slate. So his mind created it in the image that
oh my God,
his mind was used to, and maybe the body's own like mutant power was like a shape changer or something like that, and that's why he looks the same. Other than something weird like that or something along those lines, it could have been alien technology. It could have been, you know, a really good plastic surgeon. I don't know. It's one of those few moments in the movie where you just kind of go, oh, and run with it.
Oh my God, Dave! You know how Marvel on their Blu-rays they do like a 9 minutes like one shot? Just imagine like a Days of Future Past one shot where it's just like Patrick Stewart and like Botoxing on this random face. No, it doesn't look Picard enough. A little bit more.
You know, like I said, maybe it was something like that. I don't know. It's one of the few moments where you actually have to just go, yeah, okay, and just run with it.
Yeah, I mean, I suspended my disbelief because it's just so much fun seeing Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart back together again. But you know, the continuity man in me, even though the X-Men universe is so skewered in continuity as far as the cinematic world is concerned, but I wanted an explanation, damn it.
Yeah, and I got nothing for you. You know, sure, either weird mutant power that takes the shape of whatever mind is inhabiting the body, or plastic surgery and somebody cruel enough to break his spine again.
Bane comes out of nowhere like, your spirit is not broken yet, Charles Xavier. The land
you don't have my permission to die yet.
Oh my God. Oh, we really need to like just make a spin-off of this. Like, just okay. This is just really funny in my head right now. Concluding, X-Men: Days of Future Past, really freaking awesome.
Truly an awesome movie. Definitely one that I will own and see many times, I'm sure. And at this point, a great capstone to the X-Men series if they, you know, for whatever reason, never do another one.
Hopefully, it's not the last for Hugh Jackman, though, because if this is his swan song,
Swan song.
yeah, work today is gonna be really fun. Do you want butter on your or do you want popcorn on your butter? It's gonna be disappointing because he doesn't play as prominent role as I would have liked.
If I had to guess, I think that he'll do the one more movie because it's coming not that far from now. I think they have a scheduled release date of 2016 or something like that.
Maybe 2016 is going to be a very bloated year.
2015 is bloated. 2016, yeah.
2015 was bloated when they still had Batman vs Superman, but
that got pushed to 2016 too, didn't it?
Yeah, and then Star Wars doesn't come until Christmas, so in fact the summer's not going to be that bad.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening and enjoying. Hopefully you enjoyed our ramblings on X-Men
I think it was
many
awesome.
other movies.
And if you want to continue to listen to my ramblings or read my ramblings, I have a blog called The Ramblings of a Minnesota Geek. The address is mngeekramblings.blogspot.com. Oh my god, I should have said come. But I post there very irregularly, but I go in depth on the movies that I care about. Like I super analyzed Amazing Spider-Man 2, the pros and the cons. So take a read at that. Shameless self-promotion.
And of course, we can be found at if you do a Facebook search for 4 Geeks and a Microphone, you can find all of the stuff that me and the other geeks have done over the last couple of years, and listen to all of our ramblings on different movies and things like that. So,
like the spectacular 3-part TV edition, very cool.
Yes. So, thank you and have a good day.
Happy summer.